and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America. In August of 2019, the New York Times published in its magazine a major work, the 1619 Project, commemorating the day 400 years ago in August of 1619 that the first enslaved Africans landed on the shores of Virginia in what would become America. Slavery would make and define this country for 250 years. Its aftermath still plagues our society. Today we talk with one of the writers of the 1619 Project, Linda Villarosa. Linda directs the journalism program at the City College of New York. She has been awarded many times for her work. She's the author of 3 books, including Body and Soul, The Black Women's Guide to Physical Health and Emotional Well-Being, and the novel Passing for Black. We want to talk about that. At the New York Times, she's contributor of many major pieces, the groundbreaking report on Black maternal health, disparities, and for the 1619 Project, a powerful piece on the persistent belief in racial differences in the current medical profession, which is extraordinary. You know, that in 2019, doctors are still being trained on old school racial disparities.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm delighted that you're here. We always begin by asking our guests to place themselves in Black America, and I happen to know your mom, but we can talk about her. But talk a little bit about.
Well, I'm a journalist who's Black and a Black person who's a journalist, and a lot of times I'm asked, do I feel pigeonholed? Because mostly what I write about is race, inequality, and African Americans, and I say no, it's the only thing I care about. And so I am deeply engaged in issues that affect us and our community, and that's where I have been for many years, first at Essence, now at the New York Times Magazine, and in book writing, so I'm proudly that.
That's right. You had 2 turns as editor of Essence magazine. We have to make sure we mention that. Yes. But you grew up, your mother was very influential, an entrepreneur. Talk a little bit about her influence on your life.
So I think what my mother did was introduce me and my sister and our family to Black literature. So I had taken a Black studies course, I guess it was called Afro studies course, Afro-American studies course in college, and started reading books by Toni Morris and Alice Walker, Toni K. Bambara, all kinds of wonderful authors. And then my mother opened her bookstore, and then
Human Books
in Denver first.
Oh, Denver,
then
right.
in Harlem, and so it just became was our family business, so it was common for us to, I was at Essence for part of it, so I'd say, oh, Mom, have you heard of Terry McMillan? She said, who's that? And so I'd tell her about people,
right.
She'd tell me about people, and then she started a bookstore in Harlem, and she ran that for a number of years, and again, it was really fun. I have children, so the children would go up, and they said, is Grandma famous? There's a lot of famous people that come, and I said, those
right.
are famous authors. Authors come to her bookstore because, it's a wonderful, and it's a place where you feel nurtured.
That's right. We miss her. We miss the store, and thank her for it while it was there.
Yes.
So that's your background. Now you find yourself as in a very powerful position at the New York Times, writing mostly about medical issues, but other things too. Tell us about the 1619 Project, how that came about, and its tremendous impact so far.
So the 1619 Project came about because of Nicole Hannah-Jones. So she's been thinking about the contributions of African Americans to America for years and years and years. So she pitched to the magazine.
She's a writer at the time.
She's
Black
a writer,
woman,
Black woman writer at the Times.
Right.
She's also a MacArthur Genius Award winner and a National Magazine Award winner. So she is really, really smart. So I got called into a meeting that I knew was about slavery and about this anniversary.
Right.
I was in that meeting and heard her talk with so much passion about the importance of really looking at the 400 years of, from the beginning of slavery, the time during slavery and the leftover, both the contributions and also the corruption and pain of slavery and how its effects have lasted. So right away, I thought, what can I do? I want to do something. I want to be in this. And then by the time I had contributed my piece, which is about medical myths that have persisted, it had spread beyond, the 1619 Project had gone beyond just the magazine, so that it was also in the newspaper itself. There was a launch event, the Smithsonian was brought in, there's a curriculum, and so to really say that slavery isn't taught very well in high schools and in schools across the country, and so now's the time. It's time now to really teach it better.
We're going to talk a little bit about the classroom availability of this, because that's so essential that teachers will have at their disposal now, the true history of America. I mean, because most people don't go back that far to that ship landing in Virginia, and the impact of enslaving people in a supposedly democratic society from the very beginning, as Nicole Hannah-Jones quote says, is that it was a lie. The whole idea of democracy was untrue.
And what I really like about her piece, too, is that she says that Black people in this country are the people that care the most about democracy and freedom, because we had it taken away from us, and now we have it, and we value it, very much. And I like that positive spin on that, to say we have been, victimized in this country, yet we're the people who sort of honor the values the best and the most.
So you write about health disparities and health misconceptions, truly. I was looking at the video of you at the launch of all of this, talking about, John Brown. Can we have a little listen to that clip?
My story begins with John Brown. And John Brown was an enslaved man, there we go, on a plantation in Georgia in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. And he was fortunate enough to escape and write a book. So reading his story was really compelling, because he told it in his own words and in his own voice. So he was loaned to another enslaver who was a medical doctor. And so that doctor was trying to find a cure for sunstroke. So he took John Brown, put him in a pit of hot coals, it reached 100 degrees, and basically tortured him, and had, only his head was out. So he fed him different remedies until he passed out. And then he did it again and again, and he created this bogus sunstroke remedy. So then, next, Dr. Hamilton was trying to prove his obsession with black skin being thicker than white skin. So he burned John Brown until he was scarred, and he was in so much pain that he could no longer work in the fields, which he was still doing during this experimentation. So this was really hard to deal with. It was really hard to, read and absorb. And there were a lot of examples of this, but because you two hog so much space with your essays on politics and music,
keep it coming, Linda.
I limited to the medical myths I was looking at to two. And one was the idea that Blacks have extremely high pain tolerance and a kind of superpower against pain. And the second one was that we have diminished lung capacity that was actually helped by working in the fields. So I know, so the idea about the diminished lung capacity really came from Thomas Jefferson. And so he wasn't a medical doctor, but he was widely respected. And so in 1787, he wrote this long piece called Notes on the State of Virginia about a lot of different things, but almost as a kind of throwaway, he mentioned this idea about diminished lung capacity in Black enslaved people. And right away, medical doctors and scientists jumped on that in the South, because they were looking for a way to legitimize both enslaving people, but also taking it a step further to say, no, this is really good. Being out in the sun and working hard will really build up the lungs.
There is so much to talk about in that.
Yes.
All of it is just incredible. Thomas Jefferson, and that,
yes.
Not being a medical doctor, but giving a justification for the abuse of African Americans on, in the fields.
it seems really absurd to us now, but you know, it was easy because for me it was really easy to find because there was no shame in this. So to say, you know, that there's a diminished lung capacity with absolutely no proof was just taken as fact. And then it became this way that in medical journals, in medical conferences, at Tulane University, at major colleges, and you know, this was very legitimate. And it wasn't just kind of crackpot doctors, it was people who had been highly educated, who were well respected, and who were not considered cruel, but many of them were either enslavers themselves, so they had something to gain, or they were just really, really trying to guard that system that was in place.
Well, the whole notion, too, of the fact that blacks did not suffer pain to the degree that white people did. I mean, talk a little bit about that, because a lot of that torture was meant to prove that.
Exactly. And it was also the reason like someone like Dr. Hamilton would do experiments like that was under the assumption that this wasn't hurting this person because he wasn't fully human. And so there was just a lot of this. The sort of the well-known case that we know now is J. Marion Sims, who was the so-called father of modern gynecology, who used 3 enslaved women to perfect a kind of surgery to repair fistula, which is an extreme problem that happens in childbirth. And so he really tortured these 3 and more women, but 3 well-known ones, and because under the assumption that they weren't experiencing the same amount of pain, despite them screaming, writhing, having to be held down during his surgeries with no anesthesia. It was just a sort of taken as fact that this was real.
Right, right. I think one of the doctors said, that he had removed a leg of one of them without any anesthesia, and the patient participated in
Yes
in the operation. So that all of those medical experiments, and we want to think that it's back in the day of Jefferson and in these early days, but then there was the Tuskegee experiment. Talk to us about that continuation of just wildly discounting the lives of black people, in this case, black men.
So the Tuskegee experiment was in the 20th century, and it happened in Alabama, and it was men who had syphilis, and they were left untreated. And the issue, and I mean, they were suffered, and there was a treatment. And so it was just to see the progression of the disease. And the assumption was, syphilis is horrible and nasty, and these men, they're already diseased. The hard part about that, it was state sanctioned, so it was by the federal government sanctioned this torture of these men. And it's now considered, there's been an apology, it's considered torture, it's considered inhumane, but at the time it wasn't, because of the assumption that black lives are not worth the same as...
They didn't matter, and
so
many of them died. Many of them died. And in this very day, in 2019, we're talking, you wrote that magnificent piece on black maternal health in the New York Times, where black women are dying at extremely high rates, and their children are as well. Talk to us, what have you learned since the publication of that piece, and any changes whatsoever?
Definitely changes, because of my piece and many other pieces brought awareness to this issue, because a lot of people weren't clear about this. Even when I first heard about this, a friend was saying, did you know women in the United States have high rates of maternal mortality? I was like, no, that's not a thing. And then she was like, yes, it is. And I said, I cover mostly black health. She said, this is about black women. And I said this, I said, is it a problem of women who are poor and they just don't have health care? And they said, a black woman with a master's degree like you have, or even a PhD, is more likely to almost die or lose her baby than a white woman with an 8th grade education. So that's why I was intrigued. I'm really excited by the spotlight on this issue, because this is really unacceptable.
Right, right. And Serena Williams has taken it up as well.
Exactly. And that is a gift to us.
Because she almost died. Yeah,
she almost died.
Right.
And she, for goodness sake, she's someone who knows her body better than any other human being, and she's strong, and she also had access to all the best medical care.
Precisely.
And her husband was with her, and so it's shocking that happened, and it's really, I'm so grateful to her for telling the truth about that.
Right. So in the research that you've done, one of the things that people say about the reason that Black women, no matter what, their academic or wealth or any of that, is because of the stress on the genes. I mean, just the stress of discrimination, post-slavery, whatever. Does that hold water as far as you've been able to research?
So there's a woman at the University of Michigan, a scientist and a college professor called Arlene Geronimus. And so she coined the phrase weathering. So her idea is that the lived experience of being a Black person, particularly a Black woman in the United States, actually ages the body, and the stress ages the body. And she has looked at different systems of the body, including your heart rate, your pulse rate, your neurological system, and found that the everyday wear and tear because of discrimination is implicated in this maternal and infant mortality problem. And it's not just people who die. It's for every woman who dies in childbirth, 100 more women almost die.
Almost die. So that's the residual of slavery in America and the continuing discrimination. There are so many writers. Some of our best, and when I say our, I say of America's best writers contributed to this magazine piece. Brian Stevenson, Equal Justice Institute, he was talking about slavery, and he said, slavery gave America a fear of Black people, and a taste for violent punishment. Both still define our prison system. So talk to us a little bit about that contribution, because you all discussed that as well, the fact that mass incarceration affects the Black community so drastically.
I think what Nicole, how she conceived this was to say, what are the parts of America that began in the slavery days but still resonate today? And mass incarceration is clearly one of them, where there is really no reason to have Black people so highly incarcerated. And the statistics really tell the story, and this is it's a story that continues to need to be told, whether it started with The New Jim Crow. That was a brilliant book that really first laid this out. And then Ava DuVernay's 13th. Again, I showed that film to my students in my Black Studies class, and many of them had trouble grasping that. They were like, well, it's because Black people commit crimes, and these are people of color. I was like, no, it's not, because look at the statistics. Even when we commit the crime less, we are incarcerated more. And it was so hard to grasp, because in America we're under the assumption that everything is fair, and that's the way America is conceived. False assumption. And so, but it's hard and it's hurtful for people to hear that and to hear that truth. But it's also important that we understand it.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show about when most of us think of slavery, when I think of slavery, and I'm from Alabama, where we grew cotton on our family farm, I think of cotton as the sort of bad guy, the bad actor in slavery. But, Khalil Gibran Muhammad wrote a piece in the 1619 Project about sugar. And he says, the sugar that saturates the American diet has a barbaric history as the white gold that fuels slavery. And so I never thought about sugar that much. I mean, we knew that there were sugar plantations, but, certainly, and it's killing Americans to this day. But can you talk a little bit about?
You know what? I really liked the other frame in that piece was King Cotton, Queen Sugar. And because there is the frame that it was more about that the wealth was accumulated more from cotton, but really sugar made people rich, and people kept being rich. But that was also the reason why slavery was so necessary, because it was, how could you make that much money if you had to pay workers to do it? And so both for cotton and sugar, that's fascinating. And sugar was more like, I didn't know as much, but reading the piece, sugar was more in New Orleans and in Louisiana, and cotton was in other places. But it was like all of the millionaires in the beginning, during these times, made money from either cotton or sugar, but I was really compelled by how many made millions through sugar. So they had so much stake in that, of keeping slavery in place and in using enslaved people to make wealth and generate wealth that still exists today.
The project is truly incredible. I do want to show it. Have I shown this yet? This is the magazine. Apparently, people were lined up at the New York Times when they announced that some copies would be available to non-subscribers. When this showed up on my door, I was like, I cannot believe this. Just such a huge contribution. But you're saying that you may not be able to get physical
I'm
copies.
not sure. I don't want to disappoint.
But it will be available to teachers in a digital form. So talk about that, because that's the persistence of this project, that it will be available for classrooms to tell the real story of America, and the fact that first of all, the democratic ideal was false. And this, barbaric treatment of people still lingers in our country, and this is why.
I really like the curriculum part of it, and I think part of it is there is so little real learning about this in schools, and so it both adds to what some people are already doing, but also creates a way for teachers to be able to teach about slavery. In my lifetime, I learned about it through Roots. And I remember, many of us of this age gathered around the television to watch Roots, and we were in shock. I was like, to my parents, this happened? This is real? And I was stunned. But that's how I learned about it, not in school. And then the next generation, my children, who went to school here in New York City, public schools, and I remember we were taking a trip to Gettysburg. So I went to Gettysburg with the class mom, and I said to the teacher, what else are you going to teach about the Civil War? How are you teaching about slavery? And she said, well, this is kind of it. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this can't be it. And two of the black parents pushed back at this school, but we didn't succeed, but we said, wait, this can't be the way you teach. You can't just ignore slavery. So I'm really grateful that there will be resources for teachers and for other educators and really parents to talk about slavery and, the persistent effect, and also the important contributions that should be honored.
Yeah, and I assume that it's going to be done. I haven't had a chance to actually look at the entire curriculum, but I remember recently being at the African American Museum in Washington with my 10-year-old granddaughter, and we were in the slavery floor. You know how it works. You start in the lowest level, and then you come up to the current times. And as I was walking around with her, she had the same reaction that you had. You're not telling me that this happened to these people who look like me. And first of all, my reaction, her quote from it is that, my grandmother believes in reparations. It's because when you see the devastation to a people. So I'm concerned about the way that black children receive this information, because it's often crippling to them in a way, because they have to, deal with the fact that their skin has been, a negative thing in so many ways.
I think what's important is to tell the truth about this, but also tell the importance of resilience, how we have, survived and how we've thrived in many areas. The other thing is, what I like about the 1619 Project is the last piece, if you remember, the piece about the Howard University law students.
Right.
And so what they did was they had their ancestry traced. So they looked at their last enslaved ancestor. That was so beautiful to see that many of them were highly successful after they were, freed. And then, and they thrived. And there was so much pride in in these young people who were learning about their ancestors who had survived. They had done well, they were successful, they had land, they had businesses. And in our own family, we had, they tell the story of Aunt Betty. So Aunt Betty was my mother's great aunt, who was enslaved, and she was freed at a very young age. And she stayed on the plantation because she wasn't sure what else to do. So in our family, it was a little bit of shame around that until I told my daughter about Aunt Betty. And my daughter imagined this beautiful tale of Aunt Betty where she was in charge of the plantation, where she had worked formerly, and she had these crews of people. And I was like, I love that.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a story of devastation and, terribleness. It can be a story of pride and survival and resilience.
So we always ask our guests the power, the strength of Black America. How would you define that?
I would define it as, we're here. We have managed to overcome. We have managed to be happy. We've managed to, our culture infuses not just American culture, but global culture. We are superstars in many, many areas that are not, that are both their sports and music, but also intellect and teaching and writing. And one of the most parts of pride about this project is the contributors page.
Right.
The Blackest Contributors page and the history of the magazine.
Thank you so much, Linda Villarosa. Please come back so we can talk more about this. And thanks so much to Linda Villarosa for this great and important conversation. You can find out more about the 1619 Project and its use in classrooms at www.pulitzercenter.org/1619. Thanks to you all out there for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America. We'll see you the next time.